Okay, so let's go into mid scatter map. This is what we had before. We had the base color SS deep, and I'm just going to grab this SSS deep and do the same thing, duplicate it, because it has all the groundwork from the original SSS map that I have, the original base color as well, and I'm just going to swap out some settings. So as you can see, creating these maps are pretty quick, these secondary maps, in terms of starting off points, which is really handy. And if you do your original color maps right, then this process is very quick. So I'm going to open this back up. I'm going to go back to my original hue saturation values. I'm going to tone this back. So for this mid map, what I'm looking for is I'm looking to get some more variation in color. That's going to bring out another level of complexity. And I want it to be quite a bit less saturated than the original. And this is where I'm going to introduce some new tones, some cooler tones. So this is a pretty good mid for me. So from here I'm going to add another hue saturation values. We're going to change this up a bit. So, like before in the epidermal map, I want to start introducing a little bit of bluish tone to the eyes, just under the eye bags. Ever so slightly. And the crease of the nose, or the crease of the eye as well. And this is going to add another level of color complexity to the face. This is a pretty subtle effect in the shader, but it goes a real long way from getting the eyes looking a little flat. I find that adding some cooler tones really helps the eyes to recede a bit versus the nose, and it brings out a really cool result. Something like that. And then from here, I want to go back and add some more variation a bit in the nose and stuff. Just ever so slightly more saturated. Some on the forehead. Again, I'm not going crazy overboard here. Just to get a little bit more life in the face. like so. So we start getting some really cool tones in here. Actually, I think this, I had the same issue as before. It's going a little too purple. I don't want it to look like she's bruised. So I want to go more towards the green, blue realm. It's a bit better. And then maybe tone it back a bit. So I have full control over there. So maybe 0.75, like so. Good. So these maps are pretty quick to get a really nice initial base, and then it's a question of going back in and just doing some iterations on them. I'm not going to worry too much about what's going on in the lips, because for this character she's not going to be opening her mouth or anything. But if it were a character that would be speaking and opening its mouth and stuff like that, we would spend a little bit more time blending this kind of these darker tones out. But for this demo, it's fine. Cool. And then the ears, we're getting some nice tone variation in the ears compared to the SSS Deep. So if we were to hide the mid, you can see the difference between the deep and the mid. And so the mid and the base color aren't too different, although you can see how much more desaturated that is. So when you put all three of these maps together, you start getting a really interesting look. So that's pretty much it for the mid map. Again, it's not a map that I use often. It's just something I started using for the experimentation of the Arnold shader, because you can slot in a shallow, mid, and deep. In fact, if you guys do use the Arnold shader, what I've been doing is I've been slotting in a shallow one as well, which is a variation of this, except I just blurred it, just so it's not so crunchy clean in all the different layers. It kind of softens things out a bit and it gives it a little bit more organic feel rather than photographs. So I suggest you do that if you decide to use that skin shader. But for the most part, this is more than enough in terms of what you would use in production, in terms of subdermal color maps. And then you can run with this. So in the next section, I'm going to talk a little bit more about painting our specular maps, which are going to be derivatives of this map for a base, and then secondary spec maps, and then finally the displacement. And when we're done with the displacement maps, we're going to see if we can bring those back into any other maps to add a little bit more detail and bring everything together.